You ever sit in a room full of people and still feel alone? You ever look around and realize not one soul really knows what's going on in your heart? That silence you hear, it's not peace, it's isolation. And that pain, that's the echo of all the words you never had a chance to say. This is for the man who walks alone, the man who claps for others in rooms he'll never be invited into, the man with no friends, but still a man with purpose. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It whispers. It seeps in slowly, not through wounds you can see, but through the silence that surrounds you when no one checks in, no one calls, no one notices you're drowning in plain sight. You might sit on the edge of your bed at night and wonder what you did wrong, why you walk through life unseen. But let me tell you, loneliness is not proof that you're broken. It's proof that life has taken you off the beaten path and placed you somewhere sacred. The world calls it isolation, but heaven calls it preparation. In that silence, you're not being punished. You're being shaped. You're being taught how to find strength in your own footsteps. Because when there's no one to cheer you on and you still move forward, that's a warrior. That's someone life is trying to prepare. Not for the ordinary, but for something that requires deeper resilience, sharper focus, and unshakable faith. Loneliness doesn't shrink you. It reveals the parts of you that would have stayed hidden in the noise of company. It doesn't break you. It builds a man who knows how to rise alone. Think about it. Every man who ever stood for something greater walked alone before he was ever followed. Before anyone ever believed in his vision, he had to believe in it when no one else could see it. Loneliness makes you look in the mirror and ask yourself, do I really believe in me? Or was I just borrowing belief from others? It tests the sincerity of your dreams. It separates illusion from purpose. When there's no one to validate you, no one to lift you up, and no one to tell you you're on the right path, what remains is raw authenticity. You learn to trust your gut even when your knees are shaking. You learn to build not because anyone's watching, but because something inside of you knows it must be built. You see, the crowd is a comfort, but it's in solitude that confidence is forged. You might not have company in your struggle, but you're not without purpose in your pain. Loneliness is a filter. It sifts out who you thought you were and leaves you face to face with who you truly are. It's easy to mistake solitude for punishment, especially in a world obsessed with social validation. But let me ask you, how can a man ever learn his own voice if he's constantly echoing someone else's? Loneliness clears the air. It removes the distractions. When your phone doesn't ring and your inbox is empty and no one's knocking on your door, that's when your soul has the space to speak. That's when you start hearing what you really want, not what they wanted for you. That's when you start to uncover the quiet passions, the forgotten ambitions, the untapped potential. In those empty rooms, something sacred happens. You stop performing and start becoming. You stop chasing company and start chasing calling. And though it hurts, God knows it hurts. You start to realize that the pain is part of the process. It's your spiritual gym. Every day you wake up alone but choose to rise anyway. You're adding strength to muscles the world can't see. You're building spiritual stamina, mental toughness, and emotional independence. Loneliness doesn't just test your character, it develops it. It's in that season of isolation where you begin to understand what kind of man you're becoming. No crowd means no masks, no friends to hide behind, no applause to feed your ego. Just you, your thoughts, and your truth. And that's a terrifying but powerful place to be, because you can't fake it anymore. You can't pretend you're okay when you're not. You can't cover your insecurities with laughter or busyness. Loneliness demands honesty. It invites you to sit with your wounds, not to wallow in them, but to understand them, to heal them. And once you've stared that darkness in the face and chosen not to back down, you become dangerous in the best way. Because the man who survives the fire alone learns that his strength comes from within, not from the crowd, not from the compliments, and not from the comfort of others. That kind of man walks different. He moves with conviction. He doesn't need to be liked to do what's right. He doesn't wait for support to take the next step. He's been tested in silence and proven in solitude. You might feel like this season is never ending. You might wonder if the loneliness will swallow you whole. But what if I told you that this is the most critical phase of your journey? What if the very thing you're begging God to remove is a tool he's using to prepare you? See, diamonds are formed under pressure, and swords are sharpened alone. You don't get that kind of strength from parties and popularity. You get it from the nights you cried yourself to sleep and still got up the next morning, from the moment you questioned your worth and still showed up to work on your dreams, from the days no one clapped for you and yet you kept building, kept grinding, kept hoping. This isn't your end, this is your beginning. And one day, when the doors open and the light shines on you, you'll walk in knowing you were built in the dark. You'll speak not from theory, but from experience. Because you didn't just survive loneliness, you were trained by it. And that kind of training, that's priceless. You ever speak from your heart and still feel unheard? You ever try to explain your vision, your dream, your truth, and all you get back are blank stares, raised eyebrows, or people walking away? That's silence after you share something sacred. That's not rejection. That's a reminder. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're not here to fit into their expectations. When you're misunderstood, it's not because you're wrong. It's often because you're ahead. You're speaking a language their soul hasn't learned to hear yet. So don't shrink. Don't translate your truth into a dialect they'll accept. Because being misunderstood isn't a sign you've missed the mark. It's a sign you're on the path less traveled. And most people fear what they can't explain. You are not average. So stop expecting average minds to grasp your depth. You weren't made for the majority. You were chosen to stand out. And with that calling comes the loneliness of being different. But that's where your power is. That's where your clarity is born. You don't need to be understood. You need to be obedient to the fire inside of you. That's the real assignment. That's the real journey. That's what purpose looks like. It hurts, doesn't it? When they mislabel your silence as arrogance, your passion as obsession, your standards as pride. They call you difficult when you're simply driven. They say you've changed when really you've evolved. It's hard to carry a dream that others don't see. But let me tell you, just because they don't understand it doesn't mean it's not real. Every great vision once looked foolish to those without foresight, but the ones who dared to keep walking through confusion, through criticism, through misunderstanding, those are the ones who made history. Don't curse your uniqueness. Don't mourn the fact that you don't fit in. That's the confirmation you're onto something sacred. You weren't born to echo. You were born to speak something new. Being misunderstood forces you to get clear on who you are without applause. It pushes you to walk in integrity when no one is clapping. It teaches you how to stand on truth even when the world turns its back. And in that space you grow. You grow roots, you grow strength, you grow unshakable. Stop asking to be understood by people who were never meant to carry your vision. Sometimes being misunderstood is exactly what separates the called from the comfortable. Because if they fully understood you, they might try to control you. They try to shape your path to fit their fears. But when you confuse them, you remain free. You stay unboxed. You stay unbought. Being misunderstood grants you permission to move with boldness, to walk with mystery, to build with purity. The road you're walking, it's not crowded for a reason. If everyone could understand your path, it wouldn't be your path. The calling on your life is tailored, specific, and often invisible to the naked eye. You were given eyes to see what others overlook, and ears to hear what others drown out. You're not difficult to understand, you're just difficult to duplicate. And that's the power they don't recognize yet. So when they look at you strange, when they question your motives, when they pull back because they don't get you, let them. You don't owe them comprehension. You owe your calling, your full obedience. And one day, when the vision is complete, they'll remember the one they couldn't understand and finally see what only you had the courage to pursue. There is a deep and beautiful loneliness that comes with being chosen. When your thoughts stretch beyond the surface, when your spirit reaches beyond the ordinary, you begin to realize that not everyone is supposed to walk with you. And that's not cruelty. That's clarity. Being misunderstood forces you to sit with your purpose in silence, to wrestle with your fears without a cheering section, to build your destiny while the crowd watches from afar in confusion. But trust me, the man who is willing to be misunderstood for the sake of his mission is the man who will one day lead those who once questioned him. It's in that place of being unrecognized that your character is refined. It's in the shadows of misunderstanding where your vision becomes sharp. And when you finally emerge, you don't need validation because you've already been tested. You don't need applause because you've already been proven. That's what being misunderstood does. It sharpens your focus and filters your circle. It strips away distractions and forges devotion. Let them question you. Let them doubt you. You don't need agreement to carry out your assignment. You just need the courage to keep moving forward. And yes, it gets lonely. Yes, it makes you question your sanity at times. But remember this, you're not crazy. You're courageous. You're not weird. You're wired differently. You're not out of place. You're out of their pace. Not everyone was designed to keep up with you. Some people were placed around you to witness, not walk with you. That difference doesn't make you better, but it does make you chosen. And with that weight comes separation. But separation is sacred. It's what allows you to hear what others miss, to see what others doubt, to feel what others numb. That's why you've always felt like the outsider, because you're meant to create something outside of what's already been done. So stop waiting for the crowd to catch up. Stop watering down your message so they'll feel comfortable. The truth is, they're not supposed to understand yet. But one day, when the fruit starts growing from the seeds you planted in silence, they'll remember the one they overlooked. And by then, you'll be so rooted in purpose, their recognition won't even matter. Because the calling was never about being understood. It was always about being faithful. There comes a time in life when the phone stops ringing, the group chats go silent, birthdays come and go with no calls, no text, no let's catch up soon. And in those quiet moments, it's easy to think something's wrong with you. You look at others laughing, posting, gathering while you sit in silence and wonder what you did to deserve the empty room. But hear this, your value, your worth isn't found in invitations or Instagram likes. Sometimes the very people who once surrounded you were only there for a season, not for your destiny. Their absence does not strip you of significance. It reveals how deeply your identity depended on their presence. And now you get to reclaim it. This space isn't a punishment, it's a revelation. A holy space where you realize your value is constant even when your circle is not. You're still worthy, even if no one says it. You're still gifted, even if no one claps. The absence of friends isn't proof you're unlovable. It's often proof that life is removing noise so you can finally hear the truth. You never needed their presence to be whole. Think about the times you were surrounded by people but still felt empty. You laughed at jokes you didn't find funny. You nodded to dreams that weren't yours. You gave pieces of yourself away just to be accepted, liked, and kept around. But deep down you knew it wasn't real. You knew you were sacrificing authenticity for connection. And now that the silence has settled in, you're finally faced with the truth you were avoiding. You didn't lose them, you found you. The absence of friends can feel like abandonment, but more often than not, it's a divine redirection. You were never meant to pour endlessly into people who couldn't pour back. You were never meant to beg to be seen by people who only looked at you when they needed something. So this loneliness, it's not emptiness. It's space being made for something greater, a deeper connection to yourself, a clear understanding of your path, a renewed awareness that your value was never rooted in community. It was rooted in character. And character doesn't need an audience to exist. It just needs courage to continue growing. You were not created to be validated by the temporary opinions of temporary people. That sting you feel when you're left out, forgotten, or overlooked, that's not the truth about your worth. That's just the reaction of a heart that once tied its identity to others. But now you're being given the rare opportunity to be free from that dependency. You're learning how to stand tall, even when no one is standing beside you. You're learning how to encourage yourself, how to build alone, how to find peace without needing a crowd to feel alive. And in that place, you discover something powerful. You are still valuable, still full of potential, still overflowing with gifts, even if no one is clapping for you. The spotlight doesn't define your brightness. Applause doesn't determine your impact. The truth is, some of the most valuable people in history walked through long seasons of isolation. They were misunderstood, overlooked, underestimated, but they were never without value. They carried something inside of them the world wasn't ready for yet. And maybe, just maybe, that's you right now. Not invisible, not irrelevant, just being prepared in silence for something that requires solitude. It's easy to believe the lie that your worth is measured by social currency, that if you're not constantly surrounded, praised, or wanted, then something must be wrong with you. But the truth is, not everyone has the capacity to recognize the treasure you carry. And that's not your fault. That's their limitation. Some people don't know how to value something that doesn't immediately benefit them. But your value isn't tied to how others see you. It's tied to how deeply you remain true to yourself, even when no one's looking. When friends disappear, when support vanishes, when you're left standing alone, you're not less, you're being refined. That's when integrity grows. That's when independence develops. That's when self-worth is no longer borrowed from the approval of others, but built through the choices you make in solitude. You don't become valuable when people recognize that you've always been valuable. But sometimes it takes the absence of others for you to finally see what's been inside you all along. Don't let loneliness rewrite your identity. Let it reveal it. Because no number of friends can replace the power of knowing your own worth. So walk with your head high, even if you walk alone. Speak with confidence, even if no one's listening yet. Create, build, and grow not for attention, but from intention. There is power in being overlooked. There is strength in walking alone, because that journey teaches you how to find validation from within. It teaches you how to be content without depending on connection. It teaches you how to lead yourself, how to trust your own voice, how to walk in purpose even when the road is empty. One day, the same people who didn't see you will wonder how you built what you did without them. And the answer won't be bitterness, it will be clarity. You didn't need to be surrounded to be strong. You didn't need to be praised to be powerful. The absence of friends didn't make you less. It gave you space to become more. More grounded, more focused, more unstoppable. Because when your worth no longer depends on the world, that's when you truly become free. And that kind of freedom, that's priceless. There comes a moment when the noise of life fades, the calls stop, the messages dry up, the invitations are no longer sent, and you're left with nothing but the sound of your own breathing and the questions echoing in your soul. It feels like abandonment, but it's actually a divine appointment. That silence you fear, that's where clarity begins. It's not empty, it's sacred. It's the place where the voice of God isn't drowned out by opinions, distractions, or the chaos of the crowd. It's where he whispers the instructions no one else can give in silence. You stop performing, you stop pretending, you stop running, and for the first time, you're forced to listen, not to what the world says about you, but what heaven says over you. Because in the stillness, you hear truth unfiltered. You hear direction without distortion. You hear love that's not dependent on applause. Silence is not a void, it's a vessel. And when you sit in it long enough, you realize that God has been speaking all along. You were just too surrounded by noise to recognize his voice. Now, in the quiet, he finally has your full attention. And that's when everything changed. Most people run from silence because they confuse it with loneliness. But silence is not the absence of connection. It's the presence of divine intimacy. It's the space where your heart and heaven meet without interference. That's why breakthroughs are often born in seasons of isolation. It's not a punishment, it's preparation. God removes the crowd so he can build the character. He strips away the distractions so he can download the instructions. And when you stop chasing noise for comfort, you start finding purpose in peace. The silence is not to break you, it's to build you. It's the quiet that uncovers the layers you've buried beneath performance, validation, and people-pleasing. And as uncomfortable as it may feel, it's necessary. Because in silence, you stop outsourcing your worth. You stop depending on others to confirm what God already declared, and you begin to walk in a confidence that doesn't need to be seen to be real. This is where identity is reborn, not in the crowd, but in the quiet. God doesn't yell to compete with the world. He waits for the silence so he can speak in a way that forever marks your soul. Have you ever sat in stillness so deep that it made you uncomfortable? So quiet it exposed the thoughts you usually keep buried beneath busyness? That's where transformation begins. Because the silence reveals everything. The fears you avoid, the pain you ignore, the purpose you postpone, it all surfaces. But God isn't afraid of your mess. He invites it into the silence so he can heal it. He meets you in the stillness, not with shame, but with truth. A truth that doesn't condemn you, it corrects you. It lifts your chin when the world has bowed your head. It reminds you of your value when you've forgotten it. And most importantly, it refocuses you. Because the silence is a mirror. And in it, you see not just who you are, but who you're called to become. God uses silence not to punish, but to recalibrate. To strip away the distractions and remind you of the mission. To pull you out of noise and into purpose. You won't find your calling in the crowd's opinion. You'll find it in God's whisper. And that whisper gets louder the more you lean into the stillness. The deeper the silence, the clearer his voice becomes. It's in the silence that you remember who's really in control. Not the opinions, not the followers, not the trends, but the one who sees the end from the beginning. When you unplug from the world and tune into the stillness, something supernatural happens. Anxiety quiets, fear loses its grip, chaos no longer rules. Because peace isn't the absence of problems, it's the presence of God. And his presence is most felt in. That's why some of the most powerful moments in your life will not come during celebration, but during isolation. When you're stripped of everything and everyone you leaned on, and all that remains is you and him. And in that space, he rebuilds you. He reminds you of promises you forgot. He breathes life into dreams that died. He shows you that even in the absence of noise, you are never alone. The silence becomes your sanctuary. And as strange as it sounds, you start to crave it. Not because you enjoy being alone, but because you finally recognize the power it holds. You hear with more clarity. You think with more purpose. You move with more confidence. Because you're no longer reacting to noise. You're responding to the voice of God. The world teaches you to fear silence, to fill every moment with scrolling, streaming, speaking, anything but stillness. But the soul wasn't designed to survive on noise. It was made to thrive in communion. And communion starts in the quiet. That's where God gives revelation. That's where he speaks strategy. That's where he confirms what your spirit has been sensing, but your mind couldn't articulate. And in those moments, something shifts. Your decisions become more intentional. Your boundaries become more firm. Your walk becomes more focused. Because when you've heard from God, you no longer need validation from man. That's the gift of silence. It recalibrates your authority. You start living not from reaction, but from revelation. You don't chase the next thing. You steward what's in front of you. You don't beg for clarity. You receive it in stillness. And when you finally emerge from that silent season, you're not the same. You've been refined. You've been redirected. You've been realigned. Not because someone preached to you, not because someone praised you, but because God met you in the silence. And in that holy hush, he reminded you exactly who you are. Rejection cuts deep. It makes you question your worth, your purpose, your place in the world. It can come from people you trusted, places you dreamed of, or opportunities you worked tirelessly for. And when it hits, it doesn't just hurt, it shakes your foundation. But here's the truth most people don't see in that moment. Rejection is not always destruction, it's often construction. It feels like an end, but it's really a beginning. When that door closed, when that relationship fell apart, when that job slipped through your fingers, it wasn't punishment, it was protection. It was God saying, that's not where you're meant to settle. That's not the level I created you for. Rejection is the whisper that says, there's something greater ahead, keep moving. It doesn't always come with clarity, but it always comes with purpose. And if you can shift your perspective from pain to preparation, you'll realize that rejection is simply God's way of rerouting your steps towards something you never imagined, but always needed. You don't lose value when you're rejected. You get repositioned, not to fall back, but to rise higher. Rejection may feel like a setback, But in heaven's eyes, it's a setup for elevation. Sometimes the people who reject you are simply not capable of carrying the weight of your destiny. You weren't too much, they were just too small for the calling on your life. And instead of trying to squeeze yourself into spaces that shrink your potential, rejection comes to free you. It doesn't always feel good in the moment. It stings, it bruises, it confuses you. But behind the discomfort is divine strategy. Because elevation requires separation. You can't fly if you're tethered to people or places that are only meant for your past. So rejection breaks the ties you were too afraid to cut yourself. It pushes you out of comfort so you can grow into purpose. And once you stop chasing what left, you'll start walking toward what's next. The job that turned you down, maybe it was a cage in disguise. The person who walked away, maybe they were blocking the one who's coming. The plan that failed, maybe it was too small for the greatness inside you. Rejection forces you to confront what you thought you wanted and trust that what's ahead is far greater than what you lost. That's not a loss. It's preparation for a higher level. Rejection reveals who you are when no one else is watching. It strips you of outside affirmation and asks the question, do you still believe in you? Can you still move forward when the answer is no, the door is shut, and the people you counted on disappear? That's when character is built. That's when resilience is born. That's when your faith gets tested and your purpose gets sharpened. Because elevation doesn't begin on the mountaintop. It starts in the valley of disappointment. It starts in the moments when you feel forgotten but still choose to show up. It starts in the silence when you keep working even when no one is clapping. And slowly, rejection becomes fuel. It becomes the reminder that if people had said yes, you might have never discovered what you're truly capable of. If life had gone according to your plan, you might have missed God's plan. And his plan always leads to more growth, more depth, more purpose. So when rejection hits, don't bow your head in shame. Lift it in strength. Because the very thing that denied you could be the reason you reach levels you never imagined. There's something about rejection that forces you to get real with yourself. When the door slams, you have to decide, will you sit and sulk or will you rise and reroute? And in that moment, your mindset becomes your map. If you see rejection as failure, you'll stay stuck. But if you see it as redirection, you'll start moving toward elevation. Every great success story is laced with rejection. Every leader, every visionary, every world changer has heard no more than they've heard yes. But they didn't stop. They didn't fold. They learned to see rejection not as a wall, but as a window to a different path, a better path, one that may take longer, one that may be lonelier, but one that leads to something higher. Rejection teaches you to depend not on open doors, but on your inner drive, to stop seeking acceptance and start seeking alignment. Because the truth is, not every yes is a blessing, and not every no is a curse. Some no's are the greatest gifts you'll ever receive. They save you from settling. They shake you awake. They push you past the limits you didn't even know you had. That's what redirection does. It leads you to elevation. You're not defined by who rejected you. You're defined by how you respond. When the door closed, you had two choices: stay bitter or get better. Let it break you or let it build you. And if you choose the latter, you'll start to see the beauty in every closed chapter. You'll realize that rejection is not the opposite of progress. It's part of it. It's the fire that refines, the storm that strengthens, the wind that lifts you higher. But only if you let it. Only if you trust that your journey doesn't end at rejection, it begins there. Because what you call rejection, God calls redirection. And redirection always has one destination: elevation. Not comfort, not convenience, but growth that stretches you, paths that mature you, and levels that expand you. So stop chasing people who walked away. Stop crying over closed doors. Stop begging to be accepted into rooms that aren't built for your destiny. Instead, look up. Look forward. Look within. Everything you thought you lost is leading you to what you were always meant to gain. And that right there is how rejection becomes the launch pad to your highest calling. There is a lie whispered into the soul of anyone walking through solitude It says if you're alone, you must be unworthy. If no one is calling, if no one is checking in, if no one is staying, then you must not matter. But that lie is not truth. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. One is a condition, the other is a conclusion. Just because people aren't around you doesn't mean you've been forgotten. Sometimes God clears the room not to hurt you, but to hold you, to draw you in, to separate you from noise so he can restore what the world tried to drain. Many confuse the absence of others with the absence of love, but love doesn't always look like a crowd. Sometimes it looks like a quiet season that forces you to confront yourself and remember your worth. Solitude can be a sanctuary when you stop seeing it as punishment. Not every person who leaves your life is your enemy. Some were simply part of the chapter that's now closed. You're not abandoned, you're being refined. And if you allow it, the time you spend alone can teach you who you are without the echo of everyone else's opinions. There's a difference between isolation and intention. One leaves you feeling lost, the other finds you. When you're alone, it's easy to assume something is wrong. But sometimes what feels like separation is actually alignment. God will remove you from what's familiar to make room for what's destined. He will interrupt patterns to create purpose. And yes, that may look like silence. That may look like sitting alone at the table, walking a path with no one beside you, or waking up with nothing but your thoughts. But that doesn't mean you're forsaken. It means you're being called to stand on your own 2 feet, not to prove yourself to others, but to discover yourself. Being alone strips away every crutch, every distraction, every false source of identity, until all that's left is the raw, unfiltered version of you. And that's where the power begins. That's where you find out you don't need constant company to feel whole. You don't need applause to feel worthy. You don't need presence to feel purpose. Because when you realize that you are still standing, still breathing, still rising with no one holding your hand, you remember you were never truly alone. You were just becoming stronger. Aloneness can feel like a void, but often it's a vessel, a space where clarity is born, where truth is revealed, where healing happens. Some of your greatest growth will not come in groups. It will come in moments of stillness, when no one is texting, when no one is reaching out, when the room is quiet, and all that remains is you and your God. That's when the masks fall off. That's when the performance ends. That's when authenticity takes root. The world has conditioned us to equate constant companionship with value. But value isn't determined by how full your circle is. It's determined by how deep your soul runs when the circle is empty. Being alone teaches you to stop outsourcing your joy, to stop needing others to tell you who you are. It hurts at first, yes, but over time, the sting of loneliness gives way to the strength of identity. You learn to enjoy your own company. You begin to dream again, think again, breathe again. And most importantly, you begin to hear the voice that's been waiting to speak once the crowd faded. There is beauty in standing alone when you realize your source is never people, it's purpose. Friends may come and go, opportunities may rise and fall, seasons may shift, but purpose remains. And sometimes it takes a season of solitude to rediscover that. What you thought was abandonment was actually elevation in disguise. Because when you no longer depend on anyone to walk with you, you begin to understand that your steps are ordered by something higher. Aloneness becomes your training ground, your proving ground, your sacred ground. You learn discipline, you learn patience, you learn to listen not for noise, but for direction. The moments when no one claps for you, no one calls your name, no one praises your effort, those are the moments your character is forged. That's where integrity is born. That's where conviction is planted. Not in public applause, but in private resolve. You start to walk with your head high, not because of who's watching, but because of who's guiding you. And in that posture, loneliness turns into legacy. You stop needing others to validate your movement because you know who sent you. And you know that those who are meant for you will find you in due time. Don't rush out of solitude. Don't treat being alone as something to escape. Treat it as something to embrace. Because there are some lessons you can only learn in silence. There are some strengths you can only build when there's no one to lean on. And there are some callings that only rise when the noise dies down. This is your season to become, to sit in the stillness and let the confusion settle, the wounds heal, the vision sharpen. You were not abandoned. You were chosen for a higher level of refinement. The pruning feels like pain, but it's preparation. The quiet feels like a void, but it's a canvas. The absence of others isn't proof that you're unwanted. It's a sign that you're being repositioned for more. The world may not see you right now, but heaven does. And heaven doesn't forget who it's anointed. Walk through this season with your head up. Let the loneliness do its work. Let the silence shape you. Let the isolation transform you.